Alrighty, so this is going to be the gameplay from me doing Heroes Arena this week. This was on week 4, so as of the week that I'm recording this, it was Hel being the seasonal and special units because the Merlin for Halloween has not come out yet as of the time of this coming out. So the teams might be able to change a little bit. I'm not 100% sure if Hel is still going to be like top tier. I assume she still will be because they use a lot of AoEs and stuff like that in these teams. But yeah, she's only going to have 10% all stats instead of 20% all stats next week when Merlin comes out. So hopefully the team will still sort of be the same. I'm assuming that you'll end up being able to use an unknown team that is, or like maybe 2 different unknown teams, like one more Ragnarok focused and then one with the Merlin on it and everything. I'm not 100% sure what people are going to come up with yet. But this was the only team that I used that I was able to clear an entire tower with. This one is really, really good, obviously, just for that alone. There are a lot of teams that are pretty consistent through some of this stuff. If you have not already checked out Gar Gaming, he does a lot of fantastic guides for some of these towers, and he is a free-to-play player with, I think he's around 8 million box CC. I'm not 100% sure on that, but he does have a lot of his characters on like free-to-play cosmetics, so only like 2 or 3 cosmetics per character. So with his setup and everything, he is obviously like making pretty decent gear and stuff like that for some of these characters and trying to make sure that everything is like perfect. And there's going to be a lot of resetting and everything, but if he can do it as a free-to-play player, and I still struggle with a lot of this stuff having a pretty decently well built up account and a lot of these units invested into and everything. So go check him out. He definitely has a little bit more. I think his guides are just better in the fact that, you can kind of just follow him step by step. You can see which team he's using against what team. Another thing that you might want to note is that if at all possible, you want to make sure that if there are only like 1 or 2 characters on the field, you're not completely just trying to wipe every team as fast as humanly possible. Make sure that you are, taking some time at the, towards the end of each fight to try to lifesteal as much health back as possible for some of these characters who are lower. Just because you have some extra all stats and stuff like that, and some of these teams can be a little tanky. The Ragnarok or / unknown team can be very tanky and stuff with all these stats and everything. But going into each phase with as much health as possible is obviously preferred, so make sure that you're not just like skimping out, and you are trying to make sure you're going into each phase or each fight as healthy as humanly possible. So without further ado, let's talk about this team and maybe some of the gear that we used. So I did release a video. It should be earlier today, but around the same day that this one was released as well, and I went over building some of the sets and stuff like that you might want to have for Heroes Arena if you're planning on fighting some of the higher tier ones that aren't like as comfortable for you to beat. So go check that out if you haven't already. If you're new to the channel or anything, feel free to subscribe. Let's talk about this team. Okay, so obviously this is an unknown / Ragnarok kind of team. Hel is obviously giving a pretty good boost here. I have HP defense made for her as UR gear, but a lot of the sets that you're going to be using in Heroes Arena, because the characters crit so often and do so much damage, is you're going to want to make crit defense and crit resistance gear. So as follows, most characters are going to be on those. The only time I don't use those sets is if I have like a really wonky, like old school set that I did not coordinate my gear rolls or like my gear pieces correctly, and like maybe I'll have like a defense piece in the bottom right and like a defense piece in the top left or something like that, whereas all of my newer gear sets are defense or crit damage pieces in the middle, so that way I can just easily slot other pieces in. So make sure that that is preferred if possible. Just make sure that all of your sets are hopefully consistent. I talked about that a little bit in the video earlier, but Hel is actually on HP crit defense. Rom is also on HP crit defense, and because Freyr is going to be using attack, he's going to have the lowest amount of HP, so you're actually giving him crit resistance, so that way, he's going to be the one targeted with the single target skills and stuff like that, so the crit resistance is going to help him hopefully take less crits and stay alive longer, so crit resistance is preferred on him, and then Nanashi is also getting crit defense as well, so as long as, they're targeting Freyr and nobody's like insanely low HP at the beginning of any of these phases, they should target Freyr pretty much every single time. Another thing to note is that you can definitely quit out of some of these matches if you need to. Like, one of the tips that I would recommend doing is if you know that you're going to lose with a team, instead of just trying to play it out, if you know for a fact that you're going to lose, like I think later in this run I have a run where like Arthur's the only one left on the field, and I ended up letting him stay on the field for an extra turn or two because he was able to survive. That is a really bad thing to do because the enemy has lifesteal and stuff like that, so the more they hit you, the more they're going to gain HP back and everything like that. So if possible, if you know there's absolutely no way that you can take down a character or at least put some significant damage on them for your next team to sort of pick up where you left off, just try to quit out if possible if you're planning on not resetting the tower in general. But yeah, you don't want them to sort of like heal back as much HP as possible. You want them to be as low as humanly possible for your next team to sort of pick up the slack there. So do that. Also, just like with a lot of the other PvE activities in the game, as long as you reset before the turn swaps over, then you should actually be able to redo the turn. I know a lot of the times whenever you're facing the goddess teams on Heroes Arena, if Tarmiel, the blue Tarmiel, if he ends up stancing turn 1, a lot of the times that is going to be an easy reset. You want to close the game out, reopen it before they do all of their moves and stuff in the turn, so that way hopefully you can get a different attack pattern. A lot of the times, I think the other attack pattern that they end up doing is like double Mael card into like a Margaret AoE or something like that, depending on what the team is. But if Tarmiel stances turn 1, most of the time you want to reset, so that way you're not having to deal with all of his damage reduction and stuff. If you end up, messing up some of the cards that you use, or there was maybe a more efficient way to where you could get some healing off or something like that before you end up wiping the team, you can obviously just Alt F4 or close the app, whatever, depending on which one you're playing on, and then you should be able to get right back into the game without having to worry about too much there. So, make sure that you're taking advantage of some of those tools that you can use. And yeah, I'll come back once we swap teams and stuff, and I'll just let you guys watch the rest of the runs. Alrighty, so skipping Tower 2 for the moment, we're going to go over to Tower 3, just because Tower 2, I think, is the hardest one, and that was the one where it took me definitely the most teams to be able to beat it. We're swapping to Tower 3. I used the Angel team to begin with here. I did end up losing it around halfway through, maybe a little bit more than halfway through, and had to swap to a different team. So ideally, if you can get good enough RNG here and everything, you should hopefully be able to clear this, with one team. But if you get really bad RNG and some of the characters that you go against have a lot of infects, or, just get better RNG than you, sometimes it can kind of kill your run. I mean, obviously, if you want to go for like max rewards, just reset the tower, go through it as many times as you're willing to, go for. I just kind of wanted to get some of this stuff over with. It can be kind of tough putting another team together sometimes when you lose a really good team like the Angels, of course, because the Angels can definitely clear a whole tower by themselves. But I was just kind of like pretty lax with it this week, and I was really lax with it last week as well. But let's talk about the team a little bit. This team is obviously very, very good because it has the buff on from Mael where you cannot be stat lowered. That is going to help a ton with just being able to survive a lot of attacks and stuff like that. Just helps in general just a lot. So the team itself, having the red SR Liz on the team can be kind of annoying sometimes, just because she takes a lot more damage because her stats are a lot lower. She does have a lot of passive life, just sort of regen and everything from her passive though, which is really, really good. So that is going to help just kind of top people off a little bit more. She does have a heal card. Sometimes her attack seal can actually be really, really helpful, but it's not always the greatest thing in the world. But You do have to rely on a lot of Meli cards to sort of clear through this thing really easily, and obviously because that's all RNG, some of your runs can die or just, you know, get hindered, or you take more damage than you want to. So, you know, keep at it, reset as many times as you need to. Try not to get too upset with it. I get mad at it sometimes, and I really do sort of get frustrated having to, you know, reset over and over and over and over again. So the big thing that you want to worry about is making sure that Tarmiel is the target. I sometimes have to take off a headpiece or two to make sure that I can try to make sure he is the lowest HP unit on the team, because Red SR Liz is an SR unit. Her stats are really low, and sometimes they'll even attack Sariel if his health is low enough at the beginning of a turn, or I guess at the beginning of a fight they'll target him. So making sure that, you know, your team is topped off, make sure you're trying to either rush for an Elizabeth ultimate at the end of a fight, or just use her heal cards, or whatever the case may be. Stall a little bit if you have to, if you get like a couple of characters dead. Just do whatever you can to make sure that you're going into each fight healthy. So Meli ultimate will wipe pretty much every team on the field as long as you get it. So be careful with that. You know, sometimes you don't want to wipe completely because you want to stall a little bit for some, you know, cards, some HP, whatever the case is. But gear-wise on this thing, we're looking at HP crit defense on the Sariel and the Elizabeth, and then Tarmiel actually has he has double defense and crit resistance because he's the main target. I think you want to give crit resistance to your main tank, whoever that is on most of your teams. So if you know they're going to target that character, put crit resistance on them. They'll just take less damage and should be able to hopefully survive some of these crazy attacks. Meli is actually on attack crit damage. You don't actually have to give him sort of like an HP set or anything. He's pretty tanky on his own. And, you know, you're relying on him for a lot of your damage here. So you can see that I reset there because I was going to end up wiping, but I could have ended up using some of these cards to heal a little bit more before I did the wipe there. So I think this is the team that ends up getting me. I think Rimuru just ends up getting way too many infects. But yeah, the Angel team, very, very good. Reset as many times as you need to if you want. I just kind of got bored with it, and I was just like, all right, I don't want to reset this. I want to see if I can go ahead and finish it out. So I ended up having to swap over to a different team. So I'll be back whenever it swaps over, and we'll talk about that. Alrighty, so this team was incredibly RNG based, but it ends up working out in like so. I got so lucky with this team. Normally, you would use Matrona in place of Deldry here, but my moderator Konata was talking to me while I was doing these runs, and he was like, "Dude, I've used Deldry before. As long as it, her passive hits a decent character, they basically can't do damage to you, and it just ends up working out really, really nicely." Obviously, the whole gimmick to this team, you've probably seen it in some of the previous seasons of Heroes Arena. The idea is that Melascula, you put no gear or very low tier gear on whoever is going to be tanking, which ends up being either Deldry here, or sometimes you'll run Red Matrona, and then once they kill that character, you will end up getting the resurrection debuff or buff from Melascula. They stay alive, they keep hitting her with single targets and everything, and then you can basically just use True Magic Meli and Demon King once his stats pop to do huge damage and wipe the field. You obviously have to do it within a certain amount of turns, which can be a little risky, because if they end up getting rid of that fourth character because the resurrection debuff either goes away or they have a way to remove buffs, that one can also be really annoying. It can kind of kill the run a little bit. Luckily, you can see here, I did end up getting Deldry's passive on tier, which was like literal best case scenario. You can see like these weak points are no pushover. They normally end up wiping teams. So, the fact that he's literally not able to do damage with it is absolutely huge for me. Deanne obviously does have a buff removal with her passive, so I'm trying to make sure that I get rid of her at all costs. And because obviously Tier's not going to be able to do much damage to me in general, it doesn't really matter if he stayed alive, but luckily I was able to do a pretty big wipe there. So I'm pretty sure I have the same kind of setup here. I think, actually, if I'm not mistaken, I just took gear off of the Deldry. I'm pretty sure I have HP crit resistance on the Melascula, because you want to make sure she doesn't die, so that way you can keep the passive alive for Deldry to stay alive. And then I think I have HP crit resistance, or crit defense, sorry, on the other two. I might even... Yeah, I'm pretty sure I went HP on both Meli and Demon King. I originally only had an HP defense set for him. I do have an attack set for him now, and because he's not really the target and you want him to do a lot of damage when he pops his stats, you could maybe go for that, but the lower his HP and stuff is, the more he might end up being a target for somebody, so maybe be a little bit weary of that. But luckily, I also ended up getting the Deldry passive on the Echidna here, so he was not able to infect me, which was pretty nice, and once I popped my stats, you can see I was pretty much good to go. So that is the floor, or the tower down. We'll move on to tower 2. Okay, so the last tower that I fought was with the human team. This team is, I would say, pretty hit or miss. I was not a big fan of using this one. I had a bunch of dead runs at the beginning, had to reset this one a lot. But I did see, whenever I was playing or watching Konata do his after I finished my runs, he was able to beat an entire tower with this team. I guess, did not get as lucky. So do be aware of that. One of the big concerns here is that Bond is going to apply a lot of debuffs to that Scotty, which might end up being a bit of a problem. So make sure that you're using your Arthur stances and stuff like that accordingly. I do end up popping Relic pretty often whenever I end up using it, so be pretty careful with that, because you only get it once per fight. Levi ends up being the main tank for this because he just has the lowest stats. I actually only have an attack crit damage set for him, so I had to give him my Margaret gear and then put crit resistance pieces in the middle for it, so he ends up taking hopefully less damage. Luckily, he does have that that buff as a part of his passive where he cannot be stat lowered, or no, it's not stat lowered, it's he cannot be debuffed. He gains debuff immunity. So that ends up helping quite a bit, because whenever you go up against tiers and stuff like that, he can't lower Levi's crit resistance or anything, and he's able to take a couple of extra hits here. In this run specifically, I got pretty lucky in the fact that even though I think Levi ends up dying against the tier team, which was the second team that you go against, I'm pretty sure that it's 2 tier cards and then a Freyr Cleave card, and he dies on the Freyr Cleave card. But I was actually able to take this team on to finish that fight, and then I was able to beat the next fight with basically just Arthur and Bond left, which was crazy to me. So that got me a whole extra fight in, and then I did end up having to use several teams towards the end to make sure that I could to finish this thing off. But feel free. I obviously am trying to stall, gain as much HP back as possible. I do have, not dissolves, but I can take off ultimate move gauge with Arthur. Just kind of trying to stall, gain as much HP back as I can, because going into the tier fight, you want to be as topped off as humanly possible, or else you're going to take, a little bit too much damage and end up losing a character or two. So be very aware of that. I'll come back whenever I swap teams. Alrighty, so I ended up using this sort of like Fraudrin bomb team after losing the Arthur and Bond there. If you need to look up teams and stuff like that, definitely use the Grand Sheet. I should have a link down in the description below for it. 7K Dreamer Plays and another guy, I can't remember his name at the moment, helps make that Grand Sheet, and basically has like everything you could ever need information-wise from the game. So he has a couple of teams like this that you can use if you really need to like get through a team quick. I knew that this Angel team was going to be a problem, so the idea here is obviously I'm just ult rushing with Frowdren. Unfortunately, I shouldn't have put on the stance there because it ended up giving them a clear target to Deanne, but I ended up using Lost Vein to pretty much wipe the entire team here. I did get to go into the next fight, which was the Catastrophes, but I end up losing him before I can kill anybody off. I do survive like with the Lost Vein, but I'm not able to do enough damage to the champion Meliodas to get him off the board, which really sucks because if I could have, then I would have been able to out-CC at that point. And once you can out-CC these fights, they become a lot easier just setting up and going first. So a little bit unfortunate there, so I had to swap over to a little bit of an unknown team. I had not used tier yet, so I went for sort of just like this hopefully big damage, at least if I, die on turn 2 or something, I can try to get some decent damage off, kill a character or two. Unfortunately, they just did a lot here. The mono alone does a ton of damage to tier, which was kind of what I was hoping on. Luckily, Ghislaine does end up surviving here, so I can use her to just spam a couple of cards, get rid of the champion Meliodas, and then I can basically swap over to a new team. The last team that I ended up using, which you'll see in a second, is an assault mode Meli team with Chandler on it. I really, really like the team. It has a ton of like stat reduction and stuff like that, so you can use it to sort of just survive and just do some pretty good damage. They obviously hit into you. You gain stacks on Meli. He's been out for a while. You probably know how he works, but he ends up being like a really nice character to sort of fall back on when in like these scenarios. Obviously, I was not able to beat the thing within 3 or 4 teams, so I didn't get max rewards. But obviously, like I said earlier in the video, I was a little bit more lax with it this week. So if you want to take it a little bit more serious, obviously reset as many times as you want to. If you have any team suggestions or anything for me or anybody else, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. But this was how I beat it. I did use 7 teams, unfortunately, but hey, as long as you can beat Challenger at least twice within a season, you should be able to gain, and you're able to beat, if you beat it twice on Challenger and you can beat it on Champion consistently, you should be able to get every single LR seal in the shop, which means that you can make an LR as quickly as possible. So yeah. That's pretty much it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully this was helpful. Like I said, if you have any thoughts or suggestions or anything like that, leave them down in the comments below. And I will see you guys in the next one.